This is Carol McCoy. Today is February 21st, 2019, on a Thursday, at Gullett, Sanford, Robinson, and Martin, 150 2nd Avenue South in the Pinnacle Building. I am conducting the interview of Nancy Corley for the Legal History Project of the Nashville Bar Association. Nancy, would you please tell us your full name, your date, and place of birth?
My full name is Nancy Carleen Kreider Corley. I was born April the 25th, do I have to tell the year? 1942 in Paris, Tennessee.
A little background on your family, if you could. Kind of fill us in on your grandparents, where they were from, what they did, your parents, and if you know their places and dates of birth.
My mother was born in Hazel, Kentucky in 1902. My father was born in Paris in 1900. I was an only child of an only child. So my parents were 40 when I was born. So I was pretty stinky, spoiled rotten.
I imagine. So what about your grandparents?
My grandfather on my father's side was an architect. I have the plans for the courthouse in Henry County, the Methodist Church in Henry County. My grandmother died when I was just 2 years old, so I don't really know her.
What was your grandfather's name?
Oh, Clement Vallandingham Kreider. Right, yeah.
And on your mother's side?
My mother's father, who was William Houston Cloyce, was a produce dealer. He bought and sold produce, stored it, resold it. I'm not sure what you call that, but he was a grocery wholesaler.
And your grandmother?
My grandmother died when I was 3 years old, so I really don't have...
Both your grandmothers died?
Mm-hmm.
Early
Both
on?
my grandmothers died when I was very young. I was very close to my grandfathers, but I didn't really know my grandmothers.
Well, you told us about what your grandparents did. What did your father do?
My father started out as a carpenter. He worked for his father, did a lot of fancy woodworking. When after World War II, he took over my maternal grandfather's business and ran that until he retired when I guess I was in high school. My mother was a school teacher, taught creative dramatics, grades kindergarten through high school until I graduated from high school and went to college. And then she graduated and went to college and taught college courses at Murray State University and Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, in Bethel College, at UT Martin. She taught up until the day she died.
Whoa. Did either of your parents get involved in the local community or the political settings?
They got involved in community activities, but not in politics. My father was not fond of politicians or lawyers.
And what was it like growing up, your childhood, your friends, your home?
Well, as I said, I'm the only child. My parents are 40, so I was pretty much doted on, which gives you a great feeling of self-confidence. The friends that I had were the children of friends of my parents and the grandchildren of friends of my grandparents. Oh. So a lot of continuity, familial continuity.
So a lot of family.
Mm-hmm.
And did most of your family live in the same area around you?
My mother had a small family, but they lived in
She was an only
Henry
child.
County. She was an only child, but she had my grandmother was one of 3 sisters with 1 brother, so their family lived close. My father's family all lived in Indiana. They had moved there because one of my great-great-grandfathers fought for the North in the Civil War and had marched through Henry County on his way to the Battle of Shiloh, the Battle of Murfreesboro, the Battle of Franklin, and went back and told everybody in Indiana he had found this great place. And so various members of my father's family moved to Henry County from Indiana.
So you grew up in Paris?
I grew up in Paris.
And what kind of recreation did you have as a young person, and hobbies or reading?
It's kind of a rite of passage. When you're in the 4th grade, you learn to knit. When you are in the 6th grade, everybody learned to play bridge. When we are in junior high school, we all learned to dance. And because there's not a lot of activities, we spent a lot of time at the lake because Paris is Paris Landing. We spent a lot of time on the water skiing, swimming, fishing, swimming.
What was your favorite activity?
I guess water skiing.
How old were you when you learned?
Oh, I was in elementary school.
Oh, young. Did you travel very much while you were in elementary school or high school?
My mother was a speech teacher, and she participated in something called the National Forensic League, and they had state contests, and all of the state winners would go on to the national contest wherever it was. And I traveled with my parents and her speech students all over the country, wherever they had speech tournaments. We went to New York, we went to San Diego, went to Miami. Just basically most of the traveling that I remember doing as a child, I did in connection with traveling for speech tournaments.
And what kind of hobbies did you have?
I guess reading probably would have been my biggest hobby.
What were some of your favorite books?
Oh, the first big book that I remember reading when I was about in the 4th or 5th grade was The Count of Monte Cristo, and I was absolutely enthralled. I thought it was the most wonderful story, and that's basically what got me started on reading good literature.
What memories do you have of elementary school? Was it a big school? Was it a little school? Favorite teachers?
Well, Paris is not that big, so it would not be a big school.
How big is it today?
It's 10,000. It was 10,000 people when I graduated from high school. It was 10,000 people when my parents graduated from high school. It's 10,000 people. So,
It's a small town.
yes, and they had, obviously they had more than one elementary school. So I think there were like 2 first grade classes, maybe of 25, 30 children a class. So it's not, it wasn't a really big school. What is a big school?
You would know everybody in your class.
Oh, sure.
And you knew all your teachers.
Oh, yes.
Is the same true for junior high and high school?
Well, they didn't have a junior high at that point. We went, elementary school was 1 through 8. When you were in the 6th and 7th grade, the teachers changed, but the children didn't. Then when we went to high school, it was a county high school, it's the only public, privately endowed high school in the country.
How does that work?
Well, there was a man by the name of E.W. Grove who made a lot of money manufacturing Grove Children's Tonic, and he decided that he wanted to build a county high school in Henry County, so he donated the money to the county for them to build E.W. Grove County High School. And there's a bottle of Grove Children's Tonic in the cornerstone.
You mentioned that your mother was involved with the National Forensics League. Was there a time when you were in school that you began to participate in forensics?
Yes, I went on the speech tournaments from the time I was little. So when I was a freshman in high school, which is the first time that you can participate officially, I started going to speech tournaments officially.
How did you do?
I did very well. My debate partner and I ended up winning the state contest 2 years in a row and went to nationals. I won as a freshman and as a senior the original oratory competition. So we did very well.
At the national level? Mm-hmm. That's fairly good. Who was your partner?
Suzanne Looney.
Oh, okay. Do you still see her?
Oh, yes.
What type of part-time work or summer work did you have while you were in high school?
I don't even remember babysitting. There weren't that many opportunities for people to work. And in the summers, we were going to speech tournaments. So we spent all June at speech tournaments, wherever they might be. So we would, take a week to drive up there and a week at the tournament and a week to drive back. And so,
having participated in forensics, gone to a high school where you knew the teachers, you knew the students, how did you decide on where you were going to go to college?
I decided in the 4th grade, for some reason, that I wanted to be a doctor, and that Vanderbilt had the best medical school that I knew of, and I decided that I would have a better opportunity to get in Vanderbilt Medical School if I had gone to Vanderbilt undergraduate school. So I decided in the 4th grade I was going to go to Vanderbilt.
What did your parents say to that decision?
I'm an only child. I could have gone anywhere I wanted to. They didn't care. The expectation was that I would go to college. That was never an option. So the fact that I had chosen a school that was a very good school, they were very pleased.
Having decided that you wanted to be a doctor, what was your major?
In college?
Yes.
Philosophy.
Had you changed your ambition by the time you got to college?
No, I changed my ambition about halfway through the first class in organic chemistry that was required for pre-med students. I did not understand one single word that man said, not a word. And I knew I would not live long enough to ever graduate from that chemistry class, so I changed my major.
Who were the most influential teachers or courses that you took while you were at Vanderbilt?
Well, Dwight Freshley was the speech teacher and debate coach, and that was my minor. And he basically, there's a college circuit just like there is a high school circuit. So we went on debate tournaments all over the country the whole time I was in college. We traveled to Washington, and I don't even remember where all we went, but we spent almost every weekend at a speech tournament somewhere.
That sounds very exciting.
It was. And
how many students would participate in the debate teams?
Well, the debate team is made up of 2 people, and so there were probably 8 of us that were active debaters: Frank Woods and Jane Ann Woods and Lyle Barrett, Lamar Alexander.
You just named 3 lawyers, 4 lawyers.
Exactly.
Every one of them.
And the other 2 that were active ended up as ministers, not as lawyers. But they ended up as ministers.
Using their debate skills.
Yeah. I mean, it's what better training is there?
How would you describe your study habits in college? Were you a good student?
Yes and no. If I enjoyed the class, I made almost straight A's in philosophy and in English and in speech. I almost didn't pass math. I thought I wasn't ever going to pass French because, you have to learn the vocabulary, and that was too much trouble. So if I enjoyed it, I did well. If I didn't, I did what I had to get through.
Given how much time you spent with debate every weekend going somewhere in the United States, did you have time for any other extracurricular activities while you were in college?
Yes, I was in a sorority. Ended up president of the sorority. was in what is called Lotus Eaters and Athenians, which are sophomore and junior honorary societies, was active in the Women's Standards Committee. I was they had a mentoring program. I can't remember now exactly what you called it, but they paired younger students in with older students and to help them matriculate. I was active in that. Of course, I was very active with Richard.
And how did you meet Richard?
I had seen him the year before when I was invited to a fraternity party at Vanderbilt, and he was jumping up and down on the high diving board at Rollins above the pool that had no water in it. And I remember seeing him and thinking, I really want to meet him. And then the next year, I got to meet him.
And what year would that have been for you in school?
My freshman year. I think I had been there maybe 2 weeks when I met Richard.
So the first time you saw him, you were a senior in high school?
I was a senior in high school. He didn't see me, but I certainly saw him.
Where did he live?
He lived in Old Hickory. He grew up in Old Hickory.
So he was a Nashville
Yes.
native. I need to just ask you about military service. I don't think you have any in your background.
No. Richard was in the Air Force, so.
So how old was he in comparison to you? When
He was 2 years older.
2 years old.
He was a junior when I was a freshman.
And going to Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
What was his major?
He was a chemical engineer.
And did he become a chemical engineer?
No. He ended up with an insurance agency.
Let me ask you about that in just a minute, but before we go there, let's finish your education. After you finished Vanderbilt, what steps did you take to go to law school?
After I graduated from Vanderbilt, Richard and I got married and moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, where he was in Jacksonville, Arkansas, at Little Rock Air Force Base in the Titan II program. Lived there for 2 years. I taught school at Hall High School in Little Rock and North Little Rock High School. Taught speech and English there. And then he got out of the service. We moved back here. I couldn't type. I couldn't get a job because I couldn't type, and ended up as a teller in a bank.
And was that in Paris or was it in Nashville?
In Nashville.
Did you have any children?
Not at that point.
How long did you work as a teller?
Oh, 9 months. I was
What?
the worst teller they ever had. It was not my thing.
What happened after you finished working as a teller?
Richard came home one night in the summer and said, I want to go to law school. And I said, well, where are you going to go? And he said, well, there's the YMCA night law school. And I said, what in the world is that? He said, it is a law school at night, and I really want to go. And at that point, we didn't have any children. We hadn't been married but about 2 years. And we both were working. And he was going to be gone 2 and 3 nights a week. And I got my nose a little out of joint and said, well, I'll just go with you.
And that's why you decided to go to law school?
That's how I ended up in law school. And I knew after I had been in the first class that was where I was supposed to be. It lit me up like a light bulb. I loved every single thing about it.
Tell me where the law school was.
It was in the old YMCA building that is now torn down, where the Hyatt is. That's where the law. That's where
7th
the law
Avenue?
school was. Mm-hmm.
And what was this course that lit you up? The first course that you took, you said?
Oh, it was Tom Holman's Real Property and J.G. Lackey's Contracts. That was the first night, the first 2 courses, the first night I was there.
Did you have any problem getting into law school?
No.
How many students were in your class?
We started out with like 110, 112, something like that. The first test in contracts, we did out about half the class. And then we graduated, I think, in the class that when Richard and I graduated, there might have been 15 of us.
15 students out of 110?
No.
How many women were there?
When we started out, I was one of 3. At the end, there were just 2 of us left.
Who
There
was
were,
the other person?
Bobby Jones, I have to stop and think a minute. She was in our class. There were no women in the class ahead of me, no women in the class behind me. Muriel Robinson was one class, 2 years ahead of us. And that was it.
You mentioned Tom Holman and J.G. Lackey. Do you have any other professors or courses that stand out to you during the time that you went to law school?
I think I enjoyed all of my courses because it was where I was supposed to be. I enjoyed Tom Shriver. I enjoyed his courses. Irvin Intricate taught tax, and I didn't understand everything he was talking about, but I really enjoyed his classes. Bert Haywood taught mortgages and secured instruments, negotiable instruments.
Who was your contracts professor? Contracts.
Oh, J.G. Lackey.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Shriver taught criminal?
He taught criminal law and agency.
Who did torts?
Bill Wood.
You've mentioned that Richard was going there. You were married. How did he adapt to law school?
He enjoyed it thoroughly. He's a professional student. He enjoyed the knowledge. He shouldn't have ever been a lawyer. He doesn't think like a lawyer. But he enjoyed acquiring the knowledge and did well. He read, I don't think he ever read or briefed a single case. He just read my underlining. But he did pretty well. We had, of course, the whole thing lights me up like a light bulb. So I'm reading every case, I'm doing everything you have to do, and I'm making really good grades. And they used to call out your grades. And I remember one night when I had made an A and he had made an A+, which was a higher grade than I made, and everybody in the class clapped. I remember that. I thought that was pretty tacky, but everybody clapped.
While you were at the law school, did you establish any new friends, any friends that became good friends over the course of your legal practice?
Yes. There were, Charlie Alexander was an older man who was going to law school, and he and Richard and his wife Sally and I became good friends and did a lot of things together in law school. Sam Slanger, who had been at Vanderbilt at the same time I was at Vanderbilt, we had known each other there, was in class with us. And of course he was a friend up until he died.
He actually was murdered, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Was that by a client?
They never solved his mystery. Sam and I, at that point, had talked about practicing law together, and we were looking at buying a building on 2nd Avenue. And, after that, Ted Paulette was in our class, who's a local real estate mogul. I'm trying to think of...
Now, as you were going to school at night, what were you and Richard doing during the day?
Well, Richard was working at his insurance agency, and our second year in law school, I taught at Isaac Litton High School. Taught speech and debate, grades 7 through 12.
For 1 year?
Well, I had I got pregnant in the middle of the year and had a baby in August, and you couldn't go back to teaching until your child was 6 months old. And by that time, I loved teaching, and I would have gone back, but they wouldn't let me go back. And then by the time the next school year rolled around, it was my last year in law school, and I was pregnant again. So,
What was the reasoning for keeping a woman from going back to teaching after she gave birth? I knew that they had a restriction on pregnant women teaching, but I didn't.
I don't know. I can't give you the rationale. But that was the rule, the school rule.
How many children did you have altogether?
3.
And we know you had one in your second year, one when you're getting ready to graduate. When did you have your third child?
And then 18 months later, I had my 3rd.
So let us ask, what are their names? How old are they, and where are they?
Okay. My oldest is Jennifer Carleen Corley Kotler, and she has 2 daughters, the oldest of which is in the School of Architecture at UT and is making straight A's and absolutely loving it. Shades of my grandfather. She is an advanced math teacher at Hendersonville High School.
Jennifer is?
Jennifer. I have no idea what she's doing, but that's...
You're not going to claim credit for her math knowledge.
No, she gets that from Richard.
And your next child?
Rachel.
How old is Jennifer now?
She just turned 50. I know.
All right. Your next child?
My next daughter is Rachel Elizabeth Corley Higgs, who married a man whose father I knew in Paris. So she has 3 boys, the oldest of which is just graduating from high school this year and is going to Center College in Kentucky.
And your third child?
My 3rd child is Liesl Ann Corley Keaton, and she has a 18-year-old stepdaughter, a 9-year-old son, and a 3-year-old daughter. Oh, she just turned 4. Audrey-Ann just turned 4. She didn't plan very well.
How old is Rachel?
She is 2 years younger, so she's 48.
And Liesl is 18 months.
She is 40.
50.
She
40.
is 46. She's 46.
Do they all live in Nashville?
Jennifer and Rachel live in Hendersonville. Liesl is the youngest, lives across town in Franklin. So, her sister's told on her.
And right now you live in Hendersonville.
Yes.
How long have you been living in Hendersonville?
Richard and I moved to Hendersonville about 6 months after we moved back to this area when he got out of the Air Force. So that would have been 67, maybe.
And you've been there ever since?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any family members who are lawyers or potential lawyers?
I don't have any family members that were lawyers. They were teachers, architects, doctors, no lawyers. I have, my youngest daughter would make a really good lawyer and has thought about going to law school. And every time she has started to go, she has had a baby and not been able to go. But I have a granddaughter who is taking pre-law courses in high school and is doing very well and thinks she might want to be a lawyer.
What have you told her about becoming a lawyer?
That it's the greatest profession in the world. She needs to go for it.
Your early experiences with a legal career involved taking the bar exam.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a problem?
No. I mean, it's a good thing I passed because I'm not sure I would have ever done it again. But no.
What was the job search like after you passed the bar exam, gotten your license?
Well, I was pregnant. So when I graduated from law school, I was pregnant. And I got invited to interview for a job by one of the professors. And I went down there. And by that time, this was like maybe a month before. And
Month before you graduated?
this was a month after it was after I'd taken the bar, but before we'd gotten the results.
Okay.
And so I was probably 8.5 months pregnant at that time. And
Who was the professor?
Bert Haywood. So they were National Life was gonna hire a woman. He asked me to come in and interview. And I told him I was pregnant, but I don't think he realized I was quite as pregnant as I was. And I remember I got home and Richard said, "Did you get the job?" And I said, "Well, I don't really think so." And he said, "Well, how do you know?" And I said, "Well, I didn't ever get to sit down in an office. They interviewed me in the hall." So I don't think I got the job.
What other efforts did you make in a job search?
I actually opened up my own law practice in a space above Richard. My father-in-law owned an office building, and I took part of the upstairs and opened up my own law office.
What year was that?
1971.
And how many women were practicing in the Nashville, Hendersonville area?
Well, there were none in Hendersonville that I knew of. The ones that were practicing, of course, Muriel and Jane Ann and Sissy and Rose Palermo and Gail Pigg and Ruth Kennard and Rebecca Thomas. There was a couple of women lawyers in Murfreesboro. Asta Underwood, but I don't know that she practiced. And I can't think of any other women I knew at that time that were practicing.
What was the amount you earned your first year?
Oh, I don't even know, but it wasn't much. If I'd had to pay office rent, I probably would have gone in the hole. Because I was actually pregnant during part of that time. And then the time after I wasn't pregnant, I practiced law with Liesl in a little basket beside my desk.
So during those first early years, you're a young mother, you're in a solo practice. What type of clients did you have during that time?
Oh, I did wills and estates. I did some collection. My father-in-law was a big supporter, and anytime anybody needed anything done legally, he would bring them upstairs and say, "Now she can take care of you." I did some deeds and some mortgages and whatever. I think my first tort case was representing a family whose dog had been killed by the caretaker of a trailer park, and I sued the trailer park.
How did your client do?
We won. I mean, I did so much research, it's not even funny. But the judge in that case was A. Birch. He was the General Sessions judge. And it was the first time I'd had a trial, and I was scared to death. And I remember
General Sessions?
In General Sessions. And I remember he's on the bench, and at the part when they say, if we're going to call the docket and please stand up, if you have a lawyer, he will stand up for you. We got to that point, and he said, if you have a lawyer, and he took his glasses and put them down and looked right at me and said, or she will answer for you. I will never forget that. Never forget that. I get, even now after all these years thinking about it, how much that meant.
How did your father feel about you becoming a lawyer?
He wasn't too excited about it because he wasn't particularly fond of lawyers, but
That's why I asked.
it was okay. I mean, eventually it was okay because I'm his baby girl and I can do anything I want to.
How did you juggle all of the requirements of being the mother and the practice of law?
I look back on it and I don't have an idea. I mean, I don't know how I did it all. But practicing law was something that I was going to do.
Did you have someone who helped you with the children?
Yes, my mother-in-law helped, and then they were in Mother's Day out across the street at Madison Church of Christ for a while, and I had a series of women that would come in and take care of the babies and do cleaning and whatever. So, and I took them to the office with me.
With regards to your working hours, once a lawyer gets established, that first year is rough, but once you are up and operating, it's easy for the practice of law to consume all of your time.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of hours did you maintain, and what support did you get from Richard?
Richard was really supportive. He would take the children to Mother's Day out, and then once I started working for a law firm in Nashville, then things obviously changed a bit.
Tell me about that. When did you switch to working at a law firm?
I guess it was in probably late 1971, sometime in late 1972, and Tom Holman called me and asked me if I would be interested in coming to work for their law firm. And at that time, I don't remember if I was pregnant or if I'd had Lisa, but she was still a baby. But I remember telling him that I couldn't at that time. And he said, well, if you decide later you can, call us and let us know. So when Lisa was about 5 months old, I called and said, would you all be interested in having me come to work part-time? And he said, I don't know, I'll get back with you. And he called me back a couple of days later and said yes.
How big was that firm?
Jay Stevenson, who was at that time in his, I guess, 80s, and then J.G. and Tom Holman, and there were, at the same time that I came to work for Stevenson Lackey and Holman, they hired Bob Lewis and Jimmy Creasy. So the three of us all went to work at the same time, which would have been, I think, probably January, February, March of 1973.
How did your practice develop once you went with them?
Well, originally they intended for me to do real estate, and I did the closings and did the title searches and all that kind of stuff, and I really wanted to do trial work, and I kept on hinting that I'd really like to do trials, and then they realized that that if I'm doing a closing statement and it all has to balance, And they realized that the first time I got the same answer twice, I went with it, even if it was 5 or 6 times. And they thought maybe that was not my area of expertise, and that they might want to look into having me do something else. So
Math raised its ugly head.
pretty much, yeah. And so then I started doing trial work.
And what type of trials do you recall being memorable?
I did a lot of workers' comp cases. We did automobile accidents. Did malpractice suits. We represented an insurance company. Did a lot of real estate litigation because we represented a savings and loan and a title company.
What was your reputation in those early years as a litigator?
I assume that it was good because I kept on getting to do it. I did find out the insurance company sent me all over Middle Tennessee and into East Tennessee and a little bit into West Tennessee and all these small counties trying cases. And I finally found out from the adjuster that the reason they sent me to all these little small towns is because they figured that the people would think that the poor guy that was the defendant didn't have any insurance, because if he'd had insurance, he'd have hired a real lawyer. And so they could send me, and the assumption would be that the guy just got whatever he could get, and that there wasn't any insurance, so the judgments would be lower. I didn't know quite sure how to take that, but that was, and I'm not sure if he was just telling me that, if the adjuster was just telling me that, or if that's really what they thought, but I went all over.
During those years, in the 70s, while you're building up your practice as a litigator, did you have any professional or other political affiliations?
Well, at that time, the Barristers Auxiliary did not admit women.
What was the Barristers?
Barristers was the equivalent of the Young Lawyers, and they did not admit women. Junior Chamber of Commerce did not admit women. The trial lawyers did not admit women. Tennessee defense lawyers finally admitted me, but they had not before that admitted women. So the professional,
Development.
was a little,
Slide it.
yes, I'm not
How
sure
did you
what.
feel about that?
I don't contribute to the Junior Chamber of Commerce to this day, nor am I a member of the Tennessee Trial Lawyers. I have a long memory.
I understand fully.
Mm-hmm.
Were you active at all in the local bar?
As much as you could be in the Tennessee bar and the Nashville bar. So the Nashville bar obviously admitted women. And the Tennessee bar had something they call the Women's Bar Association, which was affiliated with the TBA. And they went through every year, and anybody that had a name that sounded like it might be a female, they put $5 of their dues into this fund and funded the Women's Bar Association. And whoever was the president of the Women's Bar Association got a seat on the Board of Governors of the TBA. And we had our own separate meetings and elected officers, and just a way for the few women that were actively practicing law to meet and know each other.
Were you ever the president?
At the time, I was probably the next one up, and then they disbanded, and we started basically LAW and TLAW.
And what is LAW and TLAW?
LAW is the Lawyers Association for Women, and TLAW is the Tennessee Lawyers Association for Women.
What did your participation in those two organizations do for you?
it was an opportunity for support and with other women who were practicing law and going through exactly the same thing I was going through. It was an opportunity for us to meet each other, to support each other, build bridges, build alliances, and establish a good old girls network.
You're talking about practicing law in rural communities. You would be the woman defense attorney, and the insurance companies were sending you, maybe not, with the pretext that your client couldn't afford a lawyer, a real lawyer.
A real lawyer.
How were you accepted or not accepted, treated by the members of the judiciary during that time in all these rural counties?
Most of them treated me well. The bailiffs always gave me static about being able to go behind the bar. And pat me and say, honey, only lawyers can go behind the rail, and I'd say, I am one.
Do you have any memories of judges during that time period that stand out in your mind, good or bad? I know you mentioned A.A. Birch, who went on to be on the Tennessee Supreme Court.
Yes. I can't remember that there was ever a time that I felt like I was actively discriminated against because I'm a woman. Most of the judges, I can't remember a time when I felt like I was there. You know, it may have been covert, but there was no overt discrimination. I probably got a couple of honeys, you know, but you know, I got that a lot, so no big deal.
You lived in the South.
I lived in the South, right.
Honey is not offensive in the
No.
South.
I got a lot of little ladies.
I don't think you get lots of little gentlemen, but
Yeah, but I got a lot of little ladies.
who do you recall being the strongest influences in your early career, either individuals or any events that happened?
Obviously, J.G. was a big influence because he hired me, gave me a chance.
And he was the dean of the law school?
He was the dean of the law school, and never treated me differently than he did the other guys that he had hired at the same time. And he would, I remember he came in, he's making the rounds, and he threw a ticket on my desk and said, this is for the Nashville Bar Picnic, you need to get Bob to drive you. And so I went to the Nashville Bar Picnic in Cheatham County, the first woman that had ever been. They didn't have a woman's restroom, and every time I had to go to the bathroom, Bob Lewis had to stand out in front of the door, and learned how to play craps. I didn't know how to play craps, and I learned how to play craps.
Now, is this the Nashville bar that you're talking about?
Mm-hmm, yes.
And why was it in Cheatham County?
Because the person who taught me how to play craps was Tom Shriver, and it was illegal to drink and gamble in Davidson County, so it was better for everybody that were members of the bar to drink and gamble in Cheatham County than it was in Davidson County. So we went to this farm on Red River Road and had the Nashville Bar Picnic.
How would you describe the Bar Association at that time, the picnic, the extracurricular activities that the bar engaged in? What was really the focus of the Bar Association in those early years?
I, at that time, probably knew by name almost every single member of the Nashville Bar. I knew who they were, I knew their name, I knew their practice, I knew their reputation. It was a small enough bar that we all knew each other. Very different than it is today.
When did they stop having that picnic?
They still have it today. It's now the one they have down at
The September free picnic?
Yes, they still have it. It changed over
Dramatically.
Dramatically, yes, but it is still the same picnic. It's morphed.
Who are the lawyers that became either your very good colleagues, not the ones that you were practicing with, because I would assume that you were good friends with all your colleagues,
Yeah.
but who are the other lawyers at the bar that you developed very good relationships with through the practice of law?
Bill Moody is the first one that comes to mind. I tried my first jury case with him on the other side.
You have to describe Bill Moody.
Bill was probably the best trial lawyer I have ever seen. He was short, irascible. If you sent him a letter, he had two stamps. One stamped bullshit in pink and one stamped bullshit in blue. And you would send him a letter and he would send it back with either a pink or a blue bullshit stamp on it. And,
Were they color-coded for a reason?
I never did find that out, but I remember calling him up and saying, I've forgotten the code. Does a red, does a pink bullshit mean blue, or does it mean, And so I laughed at him and thought he was cute and funny because he reminded me of my father. And he was used to being intimidated and gruff and irascible, and I laughed at him.
He was intimidated or intimidating?
He was used to intimidating other people by his gruff manner, and I thought he was cute and funny, and it kind of threw him off his game because he and I got to be great friends, and probably tried more jury cases against him than any other one single lawyer. And every time we tried a jury case, from the very first one up till the end, after we would get through, he would take me out for lunch and tell me what I did right and what I did wrong. And taught me some very valuable lessons about the psychology of picking a jury, the psychology of trying a lawsuit, and about the poker that goes into the practice of law. And he also taught me what I consider probably my most valuable lesson, is that we could fight in the courtroom and be friends out in the hall. Every time we tried a lawsuit together, he would hold the door open for me as I walked in the courtroom, and as I went past, he would say, "Get your tin breeches on, Nancy." So, just kind of which was a very valuable lesson, that we could fight in the courtroom and do everything we could do to represent our clients, but we were going to be friends out in the hall, that it wasn't a duel to the death between lawyers.
Were there any other lawyers that became mentors or good colleagues besides Bill Moody?
Yes, and I've gone totally blank on his name. Don Binkley.
Don Binkley.
Yes, he also taught me. And he's the one that
Former newspaper person.
Yes, and former judge, and taught me that we are basically hired guns. That it's not personal. We are hired guns, and that if we were representing the other side, we would fight just as hard for the other side, and that was a valuable perspective to have as a lawyer, that we are hired guns. Again, it's not a duel to the death.
Was there a time that you became involved in politics?
Yes. I ran for the Constitutional Convention of 1977, which was quite an experience. We had 13 articles of the Constitution to amend, and we met from August 1st until December 24th in 1977.
What other political involvement did you have, or do you have?
after, I guess in 1978 or 1979, I got appointed to the Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission and served on that planning commission for years and years and years and years. The city manager told me that they would like to have replaced me because I was a real pain in the butt. We have a design review ordinance and a tree ordinance because I didn't want developers to clear cut lots, and fought for years to get that. And he told me one time that he had a lot of pressure to replace me, but they couldn't because there's a little block that you have to check. If you want to get grants and loans for the city, you have to check yes that there is minority representation on the boards and commissions of the cities. And if they fired me, they would not have any minorities. I'm the only woman, so they had to keep me so they could keep checking that block.
Well, that was one of the areas I wanted to touch on, and that is major events that impacted your practice. One is the women's movement.
Oh, yes.
How did that impact your career?
As I said, there was a time when every female lawyer in Nashville and a lot in Tennessee knew each other. And sometime in the 1980s, there started to be law school classes got to be 50-50, 50% women and 50% men. Before, instead of being just tokens, it got to be a real force. And it's one of the things I enjoy as much as anything is seeing women lawyers that I don't know. I don't know their name. That I think I enjoy that. There's so many of us, we don't know each other at all anymore.
There's so many lawyers now.
Well, that too.
Are you still participating in bar events, either
Yes.
the Tennessee Bar, the Nashville Bar, or LAW?
Yes, I am still active in the TBA. I'm on the TBA Wellness Committee and on the TBA Legislative Committee. I am one of the chairmen of the Lean-In Circles for LAW, which is a mentoring, and still active in the Nashville Bar. And just as an aside, we will have 3 female presidents in a row.
For the Nashville
Bar.
Bar.
There'll be three consecutive female bar presidents,
3
which I
years
think
in a
is
row.
kind of exciting.
Very exciting. Besides noticing the change in the number of women, what impact has office technology had on your practice?
When I started practicing law, we didn't have copy machines.
Could you type?
No. I think texting has made the practice of law stressful for 2 reasons. If you text, you're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and clients expect an immediate response, so you never get a break. And the other bad thing about it is they expect an immediate response, so you never have an opportunity to reflect on what the best answer might be. It's a quick answer, but it is sometimes not one that is well thought out. And I think that has had a negative impact on not only the product, but also it's made practicing law extremely stressful, more stressful than it should be. It's stressful enough, but I think it has ramped it up.
How long were you a member of the Stevenson, Lackey, Holman law firm?
I was with Stevenson, Lackey, and it was Stevenson, Lackey, Holman, then Stevenson, Lackey and Waite, and then Stevenson, Lackey and Corley. And I was a member of that law firm up until J.G. retired.
And what year was that?
1980, 1988, 89.
So about 15, 16 years.
I can't, I'm trying to go back and think. Maybe it would have been in the early 80s, sometime in the early 80s. I can't remember.
Where
for
did you
sure.
go after that?
For a brief period of time, I was with Schumann, Leroy, and Bennett, and then I started practicing law with Bob Lewis again, who we had been associates together, with Lee Ellis, Mike Noel, Niles Nemo, Charlie Alexander, and I'm leaving someone out, but I'm not sure who. Then in 1990, I started practicing law with Mary Frances Lyle and Bill Bruce and Bruce Weathers, Corley, and Lyle.
How long did you practice with them?
Maybe 15, up until Bill and Cleve retired after we'd been together about 15 years. And so then it was Corley, Henard, Lyle, Levy, and Langford. And that firm is still in existence. Of course, Mary Frances has
Passed on.
died since then.
Right. Did the nature of your practice change at all? Did you still stay mostly doing defense litigation?
I do plaintiff's work now. I don't do defense work anymore.
How did that happen?
Combination of things. My hourly rate was more than insurance companies wanted to pay, and I wasn't willing to work for a third of my hourly rate.
What
I had
was
some
your
big
recollections
clients.
of your first hourly rate?
Maybe $75 an hour when I first started doing defense work.
And how much were you charging when you made the transition to?
I think it was probably $250,
Right.
and they wanted to pay $100, and I didn't want to. And then I represented Nashville Bridge Company for years and years, and Nashville Bridge Company got sold to Trinity out of Texas. I represented MS Carrier's trucking company. It got sold to Swift Trucking Company out of Phoenix. I represented Nashville Memorial Hospital, and it got dissolved, became, so, my clients kind of, and I had started transitioning over to doing plaintiff's work.
Which do you prefer, plaintiffs or defense?
At the time that I first started out doing defense work, it was great fun. We had a great relationship with the adjusters, and there was a camaraderie. I'm not sure it's like that now with the adjusters. We had some excellent investigators that really investigated a file, and that was fun. It was fun. I probably won some cases. I look back on it thinking, yeah, he probably deserved to get that money, but plaintiff's work is different, and there's a lot more responsibility. I could lose the insurance company's money, and it didn't really keep me up at night. But representing a plaintiff, it's a different dynamics.
Tell me about your first day at the office when you started with Stevenson,
Lackey, and Holman. Well, I was 30. The office manager was 20 years older, and obviously they had not ever hired a woman before. And the protocol then is that all the lawyers were called Mr. Mr. Stevenson, Mr. Lackey, Mr. Holman, and here this woman is 20 years older than I am, having to call me Mrs. Corley, and she brings me coffee. That was part of her job, is that she brought all the lawyers their coffee, and here she is, 20 years older than I am, and she's calling me Mrs. Corley and bringing me coffee, and I don't think she liked it too much, but.
And what were your responsibilities as an associate?
Well, as I said, I started out doing title work, and then I started doing defense work, doing trial work.
You mentioned that eventually you did become a named partner.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything significant about becoming a partner at that time?
Basically, JG told me that if I were going to be a partner, that I would have to work full-time. I couldn't work 3 days a week because I worked a flex schedule way before anybody knew what that was. From the time I started with them all the way through until my youngest child was in first grade. And at that time, then I could work full-time because she was in school full-time. And that was the requirement that I would, if I were going to be a partner, I would have to come to work full-time. I couldn't work a flex schedule, work 3 days a week.
As an insurance defense attorney, was it that relationship that allowed you to become the attorney for Nashville Bridge or MS Carrier?
Yes.
Not only did you do defense work for them, but then you began to represent them in other matters?
Well, what would happen is Nashville Bridge Company, when they changed carriers, they requested that I, whatever their insurance company was, that I be the lawyer that did their insurance defense work. So it was the kind of thing that I had done them a good job. We had a good relationship, and when they changed carriers, then they got to designate their defense attorney, and they designated me.
And when you changed law firms, how were you able to keep these clients?
By that time, I had a personal relationship with the clients, and so I was their lawyer.
What do you think was the major factor in keeping and in developing that relationship with your clients? How did you do that?
First of all, I did them a really good job. I worked really hard and got good results. And as I said, we established a good personal relationship. The insurance company that I represented had the first female supervisor for claims. And so that helped because we had a female claims supervisor, and she and I had got to know each other, gotten to be close. And there are two of the adjusters that were females that I am still close to, that we are still friends. And one of my male adjusters now practices law in Memphis, and he and I are still friends. So we just had, I think that was part of it. I did him a good job, and we had a personal relationship that transcended the law practice.
In the law firms, did you take an active role in the management of the law firms?
Most of the law firms were small enough that you didn't have a manager. We would have firm meetings where we would all get together and decide on whatever it was that we needed to decide. So it was more of a committee, committee of the whole.
Did you find that the nature of law has impacted the type of law that you do practice now?
I still do litigation. I still do automobile accidents. I still do slip and falls. I still do a lot of domestic relations. I, at one time, did a lot of employment discrimination suits, but I don't do those anymore. The files all end up in 3 or 4 banker's boxes, and I can't carry them anymore. I can't haul them around. It's just too much paperwork. And workers' comp has changed enough with the administrative part that I don't do workers' comp anymore. You
What-
work too hard, too fast, and they have successfully done what they started out, I think, subliminally to do, which was to cut lawyers out of the system, and they succeeded.
You mentioned the impact of technology on how quick clients want a response. And you mentioned some changing areas of the law. What is your observation of what is happening in the legal profession today?
I think, first of all, the fact that there's so many lawyers and we don't have a personal relationship. When we knew all of the lawyers, when I knew every lawyer in the Nashville bar, then there is a congeniality that transcends winning the lawsuit, because my reputation and my credibility as an attorney is something that I'm going to carry with me. And you're not anonymous. If I do something really underhanded, every other lawyer in Nashville is going to know, because it was a small bar. And I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. We don't know each other. We don't have the same friendships. You're more anonymous. I think clients expect results in a way that
On that issue about expecting results almost immediately, you mentioned how you just researched things almost to death when you first started, and that's necessary. It is not quite as necessary now because you have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise. But have you observed any decline in the quality of research or knowledge from other lawyers trying to just get by without knowing what they're doing?
Well, yes. I'll not mention any names.
I'm not asking for names.
Okay.
I was just wondering how you deal with clients who want an immediate answer when the circumstances sometimes require you to either look at the case law or to look at certain documents, which necessitate you spending what I call thinking time, because not all questions can be answered, not all texts can be responded to.
No. Well, I have solved that problem because I don't text my clients. They don't text me. If they do text me, I don't respond. I have a cell phone, but I don't usually give out that number. And if they call me on my cell phone, first of all, it's in my purse. It's usually on silence because I've been in court, so I don't hear it, so I don't answer it. If they pretty quickly learn that if they really want to reach me, they need to call me at the office, because I will always return phone calls at the office. And sometimes I don't return phone calls on my cell because I don't hear it, and it's too late when I see it.
Can you describe your trial strategies? I don't want you to give away any important secrets, but what trial strategies do you typically use?
Oh, I hadn't really thought about it in that respect.
You used to know the attorney on the other side, and you would adjust what you were going to do, depending if it was Bill Moody or a new lawyer. It would be different because you've just described a relationship with Bill Moody that one was collegial and adversarial. That's understandable, but when you have someone who is brand new, either a new lawyer, young, or a new lawyer who's moved into the legal community but experienced, that you don't know much about, how do your trial strategies come into play?
I don't think I changed my trial strategy, particularly based on who is on the other side.
When you were doing insurance defense work, what was the approach that you took to defending whatever the issue was?
Well, in a lot of those cases, it wasn't an issue. If you represent a tractor trailer, there's not a lot of issue of liability. We're talking about damages because the tractor trailer is probably, there is a blind spot, so liability was not, but it had to do with damages. And I was always know more about his medical file or her medical file than anybody else in the room.
So you focused in on the extent of the damages and what you could do on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be one of the strategies that you would use.
Yeah.
What would you do, knowing that you were representing not the driver of the tractor trailer, though he sat by you, but really the insurance company? What other thoughts came into play about what you wanted to do when you presented it to the jury to have a good result for your client, or the best one you could get?
Well, first of all, the man sitting beside me, the driver, is the person I'm defending. He's the one they're pointing the finger at. It's not the trucking company. It's never the insurance company. It is the driver that is sitting beside me that I am defending.
And there's your strategy.
There's my strategy.
Did you ever have to counsel anybody in your law firm with regards to the practice of law or personal issues that arise in practicing law?
Well, the Nashville Bar had the colleagues program in which they paired young lawyers up with older lawyers. And one of my mentees was Linda Jones, and she ended up as a law partner. So we went from, I went from her mentor to her, what she calls her law mother. So, yeah, which is fun.
Do you have any stories about the judges that you practiced before in Nashville that...
Not that I want to tell.
Those are the ones we want.
Except for Judge Birch.
You've shared that.
Yes.
But you were a defense attorney when we had some judges who were very pro-plaintiff cases.
Yes.
Judge Lester would be one.
Yes, and Harry turned out to have a relationship with some people in Nashville that my father knew from music, because my father was a professional saxophone player and a musician in jazz, and he and Harry had that relationship. And Harry had a good relationship with Jay Stevenson. In fact, I have the picture on my wall in the office now of Jay Stevenson that hung in Harry Lester's office the whole time he had practiced law, because Harry had been mentored by Jay Stevenson. So even though he was a plaintiff's lawyer and I am a defense lawyer, I try my lawsuit, and
You also practiced before Judge Swigert, who had a career as a insurance lawyer before he became a judge.
Yes.
What was that like?
I loved practicing law with Judge Swigert. One of the very first cases that I had was a situation, it was an appeal from General Sessions Court, and my client had not been able to, I've forgotten now all the details on why, but he had not been able to perfect his appeal within 10 days, and there's another way to do it, and I can't remember all the details now on what that was, but I remember talking about the fact there's a 30-day period of time in which you can perfect an appeal under certain circumstances from general sessions to civil. And I remember another lawyer saying, well, you need to go in front of Judge Swigert because he will let you do that. He will understand and he will let you do that. So that was my first introduction to Judge Swigert, is he granted the appeal, and I tried my first civil non-jury case in Judge Swiggert's court. So, and I was so prepared it was not even funny, again, because, you know, as a female lawyer, we can't bluff, so we all learned that we were prepared.
Did you ever appear before Judge Rutherford?
Yes.
And was he prepared?
You mean, you talking about Jimmy Rutherford, or
Yes,
are you
on the
talking
bench.
about Bill? Bill the judge?
Bill
or,
Rutherford, sorry, Bill Rutherford. Yes, was he prepared as a judge?
Yeah, he died before I had many cases in front of him, but
And then it was Kip Gaden. Did you appear before Judge Gaden?
yes, Kip and I knew each other at Vanderbilt, so we both.
Very comfortable in his court.
Yeah.
How did your practice in probate court with Judge Luton?
I liked Sheldon Luton. He was, again, he's a feisty little guy. You know, he's very businesslike, but most of the lawyers liked him because he would let you try your lawsuit. He remembered what it had been like to practice law, just like Harry Lester. He remembered what it had been like when he was standing on the other side of the bench, and so he remembered that, and I think that influenced the way he reacted to lawyers as a judge, because he remembered standing on the other side.
How did that change when Judge Everett took over probate?
I don't think it really changed. They're very different personalities. Jim and I had tried cases against each other before he got to be probate judge, and then he did divorces. But he and I we were adversaries before that. But then one of the things that, because we all know each other, you could try a case with a lawyer, and like Joe Binkley and I tried a lot when I was an insurance defense lawyer, he was a plaintiff's lawyer, tried a lot of cases against each other. And almost every time when we got through, we'd go out and have lunch together.
And now he's a judge,
Yes.
and you're a plaintiff's lawyer.
Yes.
Are you in his court?
Occasionally, yes.
And what's the reception there now?
Just like you would think. You know, he remembers what it's like to be a practicing lawyer, and you know, he remembers.
Judge Trimble was our domestic relations
Oh, yes.
judge for a long time.
Oh,
What was
yes.
it like in his court?
Well, first of all, women could not wear slacks, had to wear dress as a litigant and as a lawyer. And I have, on more than one occasion, sent my clients out to buy a dress at Woolworth's. And I remember I had one of them had on a pantsuit with a long tunic, and she had to go in the bathroom and take her pants off and just be up in court in her tunic. It looked like a kind of a short dress. But you couldn't wear slacks.
When Muriel Robinson took his place on the bench, how did that court change?
I was there the very first day that she was on the bench, and the very first man that came up that had not paid his child support got taken out of the courtroom, you know, handcuffs. There was this collective, and then she took a break. And when she came back, she didn't have a docket. All those guys had found the money to pay their child support. It was hysterical, and I will never forget that. I laughed. But you could wear pants in her court.
What impact has your career had on your family life and your social activities?
I would not have been a good stay-at-home mother. I don't have domestic skills. I don't have the desire for domestic skills. I'm much happier practicing law and doing what I really, really love. Richard was really supportive. I think my children are independent women today because I'm an independent woman because my mother was an independent woman. She worked, taught school the whole time I was growing up, so it could be done. And I think my daughters and hopefully my granddaughters. So
You've been supportive of women in their careers. One person that I know you have some relationship with is Joanne North,
yes.
and she ran for office. Were you involved in anything that she did?
Well, she and I served in the Constitutional Convention of 1977 together. She was a delegate, and I was a delegate. And then I know Steve from church.
North.
And Steve is the one that told me when I needed to do that screwy appeal from General Sessions that I should go to Judge Swigert. And when I tried that lawsuit, I didn't realize it until after the whole thing was over, but he came in very quietly, sat in the back of the courtroom in case I needed him. Of course I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't know he was there. But yeah, Steve and Joanna and I had a relationship. We were friends. Our children were the same age.
She became the first woman
Yes,
in the Metro Council
yes,
at large,
Yes.
no less. And she had a long and distinguished career, and I know that you helped her.
Which started with the Constitutional Convention of 1977.
How would you describe the rewards and the advantages of your legal career?
I can't think of another profession except I love teaching, but I'm doing what I was meant to do. This is what, it's not just what I do, it's what I am, and I love every minute of it.
What, if any, hardships or pitfalls did you encounter?
Well, obviously, when I started out, as a woman in a man's profession, there are bumps, there are pitfalls, there are barriers. You just have to overcome them. I think one thing that when we were all starting out and we didn't get the job, we knew it was because we were women. We never, ever thought it's because we weren't good enough or smart enough. We knew it was because we weren't we didn't, well, because we weren't a man. I started to say something else, but it's probably not appropriate. But, and I think so many women today,
So, with a minor interruption that we just had, let me shift to what you see as the contributions that you would say you've made to society and to the legal history in Tennessee through your practice.
I guess just being one of the first female attorneys and negotiating what we had to negotiate and establishing a practice and being a member of a law firm. It's just being a regular lawyer.
How would you define the role of lawyers today and the law firms in the future?
One, I know, we're the butt of a lot of jokes. My defense was to know the punchline and to know a funny one than you did, and everybody quotes the quote from Shakespeare, "First we kill all the lawyers," and everybody forgets what precedes that, which is if you would create anarchy first, you kill all the lawyers. And I think now more than ever, lawyers are important because we ensure that there is a system of justice, that people do have the right to redress their grievances. We uphold the rule of law, and without lawyers, then we would either have anarchy or an oligarchy or a dictatorship. There's a reason why most of the founding fathers were lawyers. I think we see our role in a different way than maybe other people see their role, and because of our skills and knowledge, we are in a position and have an opportunity to make a difference in a way that without the knowledge and skill and without being a lawyer, that we would not be able to make.
You're currently practicing.
Mm-hmm.
What are the projects that you have yet to accomplish?
I've never argued a case in the United States Supreme Court. I thought I was going to get to. One of my employment discrimination cases, it was going to be, and we ended up settling it. I've never argued a case in the United States Supreme Court. I've been admitted for a number of years, but I've never argued a case there. But I'm not sure if that's a goal. Hopefully, really my goal is to win so that I never have a client that's in a position that I have to go all the way up to get what I want for them. My goal is to stay out of appellate court. You can tell Roger I said that. I don't want to practice law.
What advice would you give to new lawyers starting out today?
I guess there are maybe three things. When I first started practicing law with JG, he brought me in his office and he said, okay, he said, these are the lawyers you can trust. And he named them. And he said, these are the lawyers you can't trust. You have to get it all in writing. You can't trust what they say. And he named them. And then he said, these are the guys that are good people. They're honest, but they're not. You have to look out for them. And that was a lesson in my reputation is the cumulative effect of my practicing law, and that it is something that you earn every day, that you continue to earn, and it's the most important thing, I think, that a lawyer has. It's his or her reputation for honesty and integrity, for being a person of your word, doing what you say you want to do, knowing what you're doing, being prepared. So you want to end up on that first list, the lawyers that know what they're doing and are people that you can trust. That's important. I guess the other advice is practicing law is stressful. Everything you do is adversarial, and if you go into it so that every situation is a duel to the death with the other lawyer, that makes it unnecessarily stressful. We are all colleagues. We are in this together. I'm going to do what I have to do to win my lawsuit, but we're still going to be friends out in the hall, and that is important, that we remember we have a common bond of our profession, and that is important. I guess those are the most important things. Always be prepared. Always be a person of your word. Don't ever pee on somebody and tell them it's raining. Be upfront, above board, and honest in your dealings.
Nancy, thank you very, very much. You've had an excellent career and continue to do so. Thank you.
You're welcome.